So this article came out a few days ago from Huffington Post. You might have seen it. White athletes still standing for the anthem are standing for white supremacy. It's a question of privilege. And this is written by Jesse Benn, who you might have seen one of his earlier articles from last year called "Sorry Liberals, a Violent Response to Trump is as Logical as Any." So you know this guy's automatically on like the pro-Antifa side, the pro-violence for people that I disagree with side. So right off the bat, that doesn't say much for this article. But let's go through it here. The absence of white athletes kneeling for the anthem Sunday was a particularly illustrative moment in white privilege. Again, another buzzword, white privilege. And while the guy does throw in a few sources here and there, so good for him. Of course, this is Huffington Post, so accusing someone of white privilege is just common knowledge. It's not to be questioned. It's just something we take for granted, because if we start hacking away at, hey, is this actually true? If we start hacking away at these assumptions, it'll all come crashing down. See, for white athletes, the anthem and American flag do represent freedom, liberty, and whatever other amorphous American values one might ascribe these symbols. So, from their view, kneeling would be disrespectful to the privileges a white supremacist nation affords them. White supremacist nation. Citation, please, because there is none. No citation. Because, again, this is more common knowledge. This is more stuff they just throws out there without any basis in reality whatsoever. Because you can tell if this guy is saying, we need to beat people up that I disagree with, you can tell he's coming from the more violent, the more irrational side of reality. Though I will say at the beginning of this paragraph, he actually makes a decent point that I see way too much of. The American flag represents different things to different people. To some people, it will represent the U.S. government. So if the U.S. government is tyrannical, they might see disrespecting the flag as disrespecting the U.S. government. Other people might see the U.S. flag to represent American values. Other people will see the U.S. flag to represent the people, the culture, the society, the soldiers. Like, it means so many different things to everyone that this is an issue where when it comes to disrespecting certain symbols, it becomes very easy for people to get mixed up. Because I can guarantee that the people protesting versus the people getting upset about the protesting have entirely different views of what the American flag represents. And in that sense, I'm not taking a stand on either side. I think, honestly, the people overreacting are also stupid, and the people protesting over any nonsense stuff like inequality are also stupid. Especially because I actually made a video, my most recent video besides this one, was on how inequality is not a bad thing. I'll link that in the description. So people protesting inequality, I think, is incredibly stupid. But anyways, going on, we've all heard the typical argument against kneeling. Kneeling during the anthem disrespects the flag and the soldiers who fought for your right to protest and blah, blah, blah. Patriotism. Now, I'm not going to spend much time with the most obvious counter, but it's worth stating. In the fairy tale we Americans tell ourselves, where soldiers fight wars for freedom and not imperial conquests, the story says they're fighting for someone's right to protest, not the opposite. So using the troops as a cudgel against protest wholly misunderstands even our own national fairy tale. Okay, so he does have a little bit of a point here, a little bit, in that, again, going back to the flag, I think people get caught up in what does it represent? Does it represent now, or does it represent the past? Because I think he is right that the U.S. tends to be very imperialist. The U.S. tends to have troops in a lot of places where it shouldn't have troops. It's got over 150 bases around the world. I'll include a picture here to show it, but there's so many military bases. We are everywhere. We are invading so many different people when we shouldn't. When the people don't want us there, they say get out. And now, I mean, look at the Middle East, where half the people are saying we need to fight Assad, half the people are saying we need to fight ISIS, when we're talking about fighting both sides of a Syrian civil war. What's the point of that? So again, a little bit of a point that America, the U.S. government, I don't think very highly of. The United States people, well, I think better of them than I do the U.S. government. And it seems like he's accusing the people that are upset with the protest of just throwing the soldiers under the bus for something they don't like. And if they are doing that, there's possibly a case for that. If they are doing it, they're not doing it intentionally. These people are not malicious. The people upset about the protests are not malicious. They might be wrong, they might be right, but they're not malicious. And I don't like when people do that, where they say, Or they say, oh, someone disagrees with me, well, they must be evil. Well, no, they might be stupid, but they're not evil. That tends to be how it is. There seems to be very few sides that are legitimately evil. Most of them have just no idea what they're talking about. But anyways, back to the article again. So that's obvious enough. But what I'm talking about is this. If white athletes can't fathom kneeling because they feel soldiers fought for their rights and blah 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 patriotism, it's because they are treated as full citizens and afforded those rights they imagine soldiers fought for. Interpreting their own experience as something more universal, they struggle to understand why anyone should kneel. Indeed, for them, the anthem and American flag represent promises fulfilled. So, again, second time he says blah, 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 patriotism. That says another thing where he's coming from. He's coming from someone that thinks the enemy, the ideological opposition, are bad people, are evil, are not worth trying to convince. Because with the blah, blah, blah patriotism quote, he's immediately throwing them just out and saying these people can't be reached. I'm just going to bash them for whatever reason. So right there, I got to say this person's not very intellectually honest. I mean, other than calling for violence, the guy is obviously biased on the one side. He sees the other side as unreachable. And it seems to me, at least in my experience, that when a person considers the other side unreachable, it's often because they themselves are biased and unreachable. They themselves do not want to have a dialogue, and by saying, oh, well, the other side doesn't want to have a dialogue, that justifies them not having to go for a dialogue. Now, of course, there are a few people that say there are a few sides that legitimately don't want to have a dialogue. Like this guy. If he's right off the bat throwing them under the bus, I don't think he wants to have a dialogue. He doesn't seem very interested in this. So, of course, there are situations where, yeah, there are people that are not interested in a dialogue, but it seems for the most part that the people calling them out are the ones that don't want to have a dialogue, like this guy here. But next he says, this is the problem of privilege. It skews our ability to grasp what the world looks like outside our view. Again, blaming everything on privilege, which that's not an argument. But even in the terms of American values, Kaepernick's point is quite straightforward. The promises that underlie those values remain unfulfilled for black Americans. Well, that's kind of a blanket statement, isn't it? Well, if you're black, it's not fulfilled? If you're white, then you are fulfilled? What about all the other minorities? A bit racist much, huh? This isn't a matter of opinion. Statistics reveal disparities along racial lines regarding wealth, education, healthy food, employment, healthcare, housing, wages, criminal charges/sentences, and practically every other imaginable measure of quality of life. This isn't a mistake of history or attributable to individual or cultural traits of the oppressed. These are the results of centuries of systematic white supremacy, plain and simple. So he gets like a 2 out of 10 right here, in that he did go through and cite every single one of these. He actually cited statistics for each one. Wealth, education, healthy food, employment, healthcare, housing, wages, criminal charges/sentences. He cited all of them, so good for them. So good for him. But what he doesn't cite, he jumps to his conclusion. He points out the correlations, which do exist, and then immediately jumps to the conclusion, which is based on nothing. It's just, oh, this must be true. It must be white supremacy. And while I can see that might be a point if you haven't done your research, it's not true, as far as I can tell. Or at least if it is true, it hasn't been proven. I actually think it's interesting that he rattled off about, 8 or 9 different things here, which you think makes a good case. If you can list 8 or 9, then that's a lot of debunking you have to do. But most of these all relate to each other. I mean, wealth and wages, they relate. Healthcare, that tends to relate to your wealth. Employment also relates to your wealth. Healthy food relates to your wealth. Education also relates to your wealth. Housing relates to your wealth. Criminal charges. If you're in poverty, or as far as I can tell, there's a link between poverty and criminality. So all of these kind of link together under one big banner, which is poverty. So then we can throw out all these and just say poverty. Let's go with that. You could say there's a correlation between each one of these and poverty. So you might think poverty might be causing this. So then we can look at what causes poverty. Well, one thing to look for that I've heard actually quite a good argument for is single motherhood. Cities with more single mother households have less upward mobility. Generally, if you're raised by a single mother, your chances of making it in the world drop quite considerably. Your chances of being poor drop quite a bit. Now, I'm not saying this is the reason instead of white supremacy. I'm saying here's another correlation. So maybe we should look at this as well. Maybe we should look at all these other correlations rather than immediately jumping to white supremacy, immediately jumping to this boogeyman of white supremacy. Have a problem in the world? White supremacy. Woke up feeling sick? White supremacy. Failed your math test? White supremacy. Didn't get a raise? White supremacy. Saw an opinion online that you don't like? White supremacy. Not being respected when you protest dumb things like inequality? White supremacy. It's all white supremacy. We don't have to prove this. It's common knowledge. It's white supremacy. As this guy says, plain and simple. Anyone who professes to care about America's alleged values should be fighting to extend them to those they're deprived. I'm not a professional writer, but that grammar does not seem right. And while the protest at the heart of all this isn't about the anthem or the flag, it is about calling on America to live up to its self-professed values. As long as black people are killed by cops in the streets or left to wither away in the state's cages without recourse, that anthem and flag represent promises unfulfilled by millions of Americans. Now, again, another 2 out of 10 or whatever. Drug war, get rid of it, yes. Welfare state, shrink it, yes. You want to help the black population, do those 2 things. Promote the family. Promote the concept of a 2-parent household. Promote the concept of staying together, staying married, and raising children. Repeal laws that allow the U.S. government to just knock on your door and take you away because you were sitting in your home with a plant. That's how you help the black population. That's how you help all kinds of people. I think it's interesting that he's talking about things that disproportionately affect the black community, but why make it all about just the black community? Why not just say people that are killed by cops, people that are left to wither away in the state's cages without recourse? I understand that, hey, if we say that, this kind of like an all lives matter kind of cop-out where we're not addressing the issue. But as far as I can tell, the statistics are a little bit murky. Is it racism or is it other things? Now, granted, I'm not saying there isn't racism out there. Of course there is. But the whole, it's institutionalized racism, I have to disagree. Or at least I have to say maybe we should do a bit more research, because it seems that the people that are incredibly confident that it is systematic, institutionalized racism don't seem to be much open to dialogue. They don't seem to be doing much research. They just seem to say, it's white supremacy, like this guy here. Next he says, understand this. White supremacy, as in the structures of opportunity, the legacy of ongoing oppression of non-whites, and the asymmetrical hoarding of resources by whites, is what affords us the privileges that limit our view, making a peaceful act of protest seem offensive in spite of the broader context of what's being protested. And the ignorant result of that privilege was on full display Sunday as white players stood next to their black teammates. You can guarantee this guy's an actual legitimate racist, because all he does is just make everything about race. It's just, he sees a white guy do something, and it's like, oh my god, he's a racist. He sees a black guy do something, it's like, oh my god, this guy's an American hero, give him a medal. You can tell this guy, oh my god. The funny thing is, he's white. He's another one of those self-hating white people that are just like, I know I'm racist. How can I fix it? Maybe by yelling at other white people for accomplishing things, I can redeem myself for my internalized racism. Anyway, let's go through this paragraph that I just read. White supremacy. Let's see his explanations here. As in the structures of opportunity. I don't know what he means by that. I assume he means black people are disproportionately poor, and poverty kind of limits your opportunity there. Yeah, but the issue is poverty, not race. The legacy of ongoing oppression of non-whites, examples? He says ongoing. I won't deny it happened in the past, but he says ongoing, so I want to know what ongoing oppression of non-whites means. Give me some specific examples of some things that specifically affect non-whites. And it's not just one of those, they disproportionately affects this group because this group happens to do this more, like the war on drugs kind of thing. The war on drugs is not racist, but it's awful, and it disproportionately affects the black population. That does not make it racist, it's just bad. And the asymmetrical hoarding of resources by whites. So, white people own more things? Is that white people save more? White people, it says hoarding. Hoarding means keeping things. Are we not charitable? Are we talking about reparations? Is that what we're talking? I'm confused. Because it seems that, again, the guy is definitely writing this for an audience that is already on board with most of what he says. He's not trying to win over everyone. He's not trying to win over anyone. It seems like he's just trying to complain. He's just trying to get his points. Well, everyone in this audience agrees with me, so bam. I mean, I've only published 2 articles before, and I've done my best job to try to make sure that when I publish something, it's aimed at trying to change the minds of people in that community. I mean, if I'm just preaching to the choir, I mean, sure, that's great in that it gives ammo to use as arguments, but this guy is not saying any arguments. He's just complaining. He threw in a few statistics, which is nice, but it's very misleading. This guy doesn't seem to be about creating a dialogue. He just wants to complain about the boogeyman of white supremacy. So he ends the article with, so let's at least be clear that what those players stood for on Sunday was white supremacy. Full stop. No. Again, that's another thing I hate when people do. Another pet peeve of mine I have is when, like, one person does something, and then someone that doesn't like it says, oh, they were actually, when they do this, they're actually doing it because they're a racist? Or when they say they're doing it for this, they're actually doing it for something much more nefarious? It's like, no, stop. Like, it's like, I know there are people that, I know there are probably people out there that say, oh, these people kneeling before the flag, they're doing it because they intentionally want to upset people. They're doing it because they're racist. Like, you're going to have all these accusations on both sides of people saying, well, someone did this, and they say they're doing it for a good reason, but it's actually this evil, bad reason. No, that's stupid. Stop. Stop attributing motive to other people. I get I just did that this entire article, but stop taking what people are saying, throwing it out, and then saying it's for a different reason. Like, when this whole NFL issue, I mean, I don't watch football, I don't have much of a side on this. I might lean a certain way, but in general, I think both sides are being stupid. Both sides, a majority of both sides, again, not all. But from what I can tell, based on this guy, the articles he's written in the past, I mean, he seems like a pretty violent guy. He seems like a pretty self-hating guy. He seems like someone where every time something bad happens in the world, it's because of white people. So you can tell the guy's at least somewhat brainwashed. So I think I'll end it here. We're at the end of the article. There's not much more to say. To be honest, the article's actually pretty self-explanatory. I just thought I'd throw in a few stats here and there just to add something, hopefully, of value. But like the video if you enjoyed. This is episode 14 of my article audit series. See the playlist in the description for many more episodes on many more articles. Subscribe if you're interested for even more videos, and thank you for watching.